And the Defense Department confirms the White House is pausing a scheduled shipment of certain munitions to Israel. That decision coinciding with the administration's opposition to an all-out invasion of Rafah by Israeli troops. Meantime, CIA Director William Burns met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in an effort to reignite ceasefire talks with Hamas.
Ghaith Al-Omari is a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. He was also the former executive director of the American Task Force on Palestine and joins us now to discuss that. So, Ghaith, as someone who's been part of the Palestinian negotiation process, how would you navigate these ongoing peace talks?
Thank you. I mean, look, this is actually a particularly complex piece of negotiation because, in most political negotiations, you don't have a sense of urgency. Here, there's a major sense of urgency for all parties involved. For the Israelis, obviously, every day passing, you have the hostages dying, suffering, etc. And for the Palestinians, the continuation of the war is something that has physical, immediate effects. So today, I think what we're seeing is both sides are trying to shape the ground in ways that will put them in a better position. We saw the Israelis, for example, going into parts of the southern town of Rafah, in order to put pressure on Hamas. We're seeing Hamas issuing some of the hostage videos to show the Israelis that the time is ticking. So this is a very complex negotiation that has both a diplomatic component and also a component of how you shape the reality on the ground in ways that will put you in a better position, because both sides have a strategic interest in the terms of how the deal comes. Will it be a deal that will allow Hamas to survive or not? So these are core questions that are being played both on the diplomatic level, but also on the security and military level.
And considering it's so complex, what role does the Palestinian Authority play in this? It doesn't have jurisdiction in Gaza, but it is recognized around the world in places like the UN and elsewhere. What is its role?
Unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority right now has absolutely no role. Partly because, as you mentioned, it has no jurisdiction, no presence on the ground. But there's a deeper problem here. In the past, we used to say that the Palestinian Authority represents the Palestinians because most Palestinians in the past saw it as, their government. Today, because of the failure of the Palestinian Authority, the corruption, the lack of democracy, etc., most Palestinians don't even give it that level of confidence. So today, it doesn't have a voice. Today, it is at best, dealt with as a formality, and unless the Palestinian Authority can rebuild its credibility, it will not be able to play a constructive role, whether today, during the war, or in the long term, in the days after the war, when we will need a trusted authority to rebuild Gaza and to kind of start picking the pieces and putting them together.
And I'm just wondering if we can get some more of your perspective, having actually been part of negotiations. What are the biggest differences and difficulties in the negotiation process, given all of the different factors that we're discussing?
Today, I would say there are two sets of differences. One is, if you wish, tactical. Questions of, how many hostages to be released on every phase, and in exchange of how many prisoners. By and large, these are the kind of the differences that can be bridged. And I think this is exactly what Director Burns right now is doing in Cairo and in Israel and elsewhere. But what's really more difficult, and this is where I'm actually more pessimistic, is there's a fundamental difference in one key issue. Hamas wants this hostage deal to be or to result in a permanent ceasefire. Hamas wants to say, look, we done a partial hostage deal and now we survived and we emerged victorious. For Israel, Israel says no. The war will only end if Hamas is completely defeated, if Hamas is unable in the future to rebuild itself and be a threat to Israel, and therefore Israel wants a temporary ceasefire. This is not a difference that can be bridged. One of the two views has to prevail. And my own view on this one is, if Hamas can emerge and say that we survived this one, that we are victorious, this will spell a very dark future for the Palestinians and for Israel. So we have to remain very vigilant in ensuring that any ceasefire, any permanent ceasefire, should be predicated on Hamas basically losing power and exiting Gaza.
But in our last few seconds, I do want to ask you about this news that the U.S. is withholding some munitions to Israel because of how it's conducting the war. What do you make of that? Is a ceasefire still possible with that?
I can hear two things quickly. On this one, first of all, I think the US has been very clear that there are certain rules of war that Israel is expected to meet, and there are indications that Israel is not meeting all of these. So I think this is a signal in that direction. But it's also a way of pressuring Israel and saying if you do not reach a ceasefire soon, there's a cost. In the same time, Hamas's backers are also putting pressure on Hamas, especially the US is, for example, pressuring Qatar to pressure Hamas. So I think I would look at this both as a general statement of displeasure with the way Israel is conducting the war, but also as a step to increase the pressure on Israel in parallel to pressure being increased on Hamas to maybe hasten the idea or the chance of reaching a deal sooner rather than later.
All right. Ghaith Al-Omari, thank you.
Thank you.